Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guests today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, we're going to have fun. I think I have a comedian with me, but we're also going to talk about building your brand, a holistic brand therapist. That's a really interesting title. But we're going to talk about this conversation around branding, personal branding, and for your company. Very complex conversation. We're going to try to do it in like 15 minutes. So I have a feeling we're going to just scratch the surface today. But Hersh Rephun, welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Thanks, Brendan. It's great to be with you.
So interesting background. I mentioned you're a former comedian. Do you still do comedy? Do you still do stand-up comedy?
I'm not driven to do it. At this point, I do a lot of speaking, and I love kind of blending humor into my keynotes and stuff like that. But I feel like I'm now used to talking to a business audience, an entrepreneurial audience, and so I feel like that connection is where my heart is right now.
Yeah, which first things first, I mean, we need to bring more fun to the business world. That's my personal belief. So I hope you're doing that from stage. I'm sure you are. But you went from stand-up comedy to holistic brand therapist. I've personally never heard that title. What was that jump for you? What was that path like?
Well, there's two things that are worth noting. One is that I think creativity is the answer. We have to learn a lot of stuff. We learn best practices. We learn what works for other people. But personal branding is, all branding is personal. So it's like, let's make it about who we are. Let's make it about ourselves. There's plenty of rules that we can follow with SEO and all kinds of other stuff. But holistic brand therapist just came from the fact that that for one thing, I have a very disarming style. I think I put people at ease. I'm genuinely very interested. I think my superpower is listening. I love to listen to other people, hear how they sound, and hear it the way their audience wants to hear it, and then kind of be almost a translator. So I feel like the idea is, be there for them on every level so that they can really step into the brand they want to be. There's a lot of fear, a lot of emotions tied to stuff. It's not transactional. It's very personal. The other part is that I work in the personal development part. I'm not a personal development coach per se, but I'm also very empathetic and very sensitive to their experience. And I've had a lot of experience feeling like I'm not myself. When I was doing stand-up comedy, I wanted to help other people but I wanted to perform, or I wanted to communicate. I needed to figure all that stuff out. So I help people figure out where to put all of these different emotions and different ideas and goals, and strategy is a big part of what I do. So it's a all around personal and business strategy.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's the most successful brands. It's not just what pretty colors and what cool logo is it going to be. It's how does that brand make the customer hopefully feel, and how do you take them through that experience? So I love that you call it the holistic brand therapist. Now on that note, I think it's really interesting to me when people do go through a rebrand, whether it's personal, it's a company. What do you find from your experience really sparks that? Is people getting bored? Is it them wanting to just stand out in a different way in the marketplace? Maybe they find themselves. I'm curious, what are the commonalities between sparking that transition?
I think, Brandon, it's that they want something. So in other words, someone might say, I want to affect 1 million school children, right? They're a teacher. They say, I want to affect 1 million school children with this idea about education. So they're driven to accomplish a mission. They may also say, I have a new GPS and I want it in every car in the world. And that's a kind of a business thing, but it is serving humanity. So they're mission driven. And what's funny is sometimes they'll say, well, I don't know if I would call it a mission. Well, it doesn't matter what you call it. You're driven to share this thing that you're passionate about, and you just need to find the words to say it. You know how when people are invited to give their 30-second intro or their elevator pitch, they sometimes begin with their life story. Oh, so what do? You're stuck in the elevator, or you're going from the bottom to the roof, and you make the mistake of saying to somebody, so what do you do? And then by the time you get there, you still don't know what they do. You just know that they were born in North Dakota, that there was something on a train, the father did this, the mother did that, and they don't start with the real meat of the story. So I help people really by going through their entire life. Uh, I wouldn't say their entire life, but by starting at the beginning and really doing a kind of a deep dive to figure out, number one, what are the good things, the assets that they have to use in their brand that they may not even be using. They may have forgotten about it. We have our minds work in very funny ways. We file things away. We don't necessarily want to even be there. We're like, no, that was high school, that was college, that was 10 years ago. But I may look at it and go, you realize there's a pattern here of some amazing thing that you're doing. We could bring that to the front of your brand. No one else has done that. I'm saying to them, no one else has done this thing that you did. No one else has combined this thing. I had a lecturer who's also an orchestra um, conductor, and there was something very interesting about that. And he said, "Oh, I also do these tours where I go and I do this conducting, but that's different. That's music. That has nothing to do with my." His topic is education. He's like, I talk about education to educators. That has nothing to do with music. I'm like, whoa, dude. You know how many people there are talking about education? You know how many people there are who also are conductors that travel the world with an orchestra? Like, let's get into it.
Yeah, I love that too because it's so personal. That's where the real passion comes from, which I
Yeah.
think people can, they can tell the difference even if it's just a written ad or a picture on social media. The passion's not there. It doesn't connect with people as much. So
Yeah.
I like that you bring the personal aspect into it. This is kind of sidetracked. I'm just curious, based on what you just said about the elevator pitch, if you will. Do you have some sort of a formula you follow, or a tip for creating those? Because I do the same thing. Like you get trapped with somebody and you say, "What do you do?" And you're like, "Oh, I really wish I could just leave this conversation because it's not going well." So if
Well,
we could help people with that, that'd be interesting.
yeah, there's a very simple initial exercise, which is you look at your bio or you go through that pitch, whatever it is, and you get to the very end of it. And at the very end of it is probably going to be the most important thing. And it makes sense because in a book, you're reading a book, what matters is the last page, right? The big bad wolf gets killed or whatever, the grandmother comes out of the belly and lives, whatever it is, right? That's like Little Red Riding Hood gets to be with her grandma. That's how stories work. But with elevator pitches and with our business communications and networking, people don't have the bandwidth for that. They're trying to make an evaluation very quickly. And so don't save the best for last. Go to the end, take the last line. And this, by the way, you could apply to any business email that you want to send. A lot of people are giving, okay, so was up late last night. I was trying to figure out how to solve this problem. And then it hit me. 2 + 7 is 9. And then it went to the thing. And then and the last line will be, so now there's a new solution. Just start with the thing. So do that thing, fumble around with your words, just record it. record it on your phone and just go through the process of explaining yourself. And when you finally get the right words, they'll probably be at the end. Then you have the nugget of your introduction. And in fact, you probably could get away with just saying that. And I'll give you a second tip, which is the next step is becoming so confident and familiar with what that sentence is that it can be any words that work for you. We spend so much time memorizing our two sentences. I help blank do blank with the minimum of blank, right? Um, that we think that that's the only way we can communicate about ourselves. Well, most relationships in business are going to require more than one conversation. So I recommend being fluent in your brand language. Create a whole brand language where, if you speak French fluently, that's impressive. You should be able to speak about yourself fluently. And that's another part of my process is coming up with those words, those keywords, that vocabulary, and making sure that you're fluent in that language. And you will sound like brilliant. You go into any party, any meeting, anything like that, and people say, "What do you do?" And it may well be different every time. And but you're giving the same message, you're giving it on point, you're giving it with roughly the same language and words, but you're not trying to memorize. You're not trying to memorize who you are. That is just and I've done it. I've made all those mistakes. As an actor, I would stand backstage and I would be, trying to remember my lines, let's say, and then that takes excitement out of it. You know, Not even as an actor, as a stand-up comedian, you want to, when you're new at it, you have your set list and you have your paper in your hand and you just throw it away. It's not just go. It's going to be better without the memorization. So the same is true. You become so intimate with your own brand, you are never at a loss for words about it.
I've honestly never heard that, or at least described that way. You develop a brand language. What
Yeah.
when you're talking about your company, you're building this brand language, do you give that to other people in the company? Like, is that something we should really be training our employees on more so than ourselves? Because I find that um, as entrepreneurs, as business owners, a lot of us have that, right? Like we can speak about our brand passionately. We can adapt it. If we're talking to engineers one day, and then stand-up comedians the next day, like we can adapt the language to fit the room. But our employees are so focused on like memorizing the script, so to speak, that it does not translate as well. And that's why we can't scale as
Yeah.
entrepreneurs. We're stuck in sales.
That's right.
So how do you feel about that?
That's very intuitive, Brandon, because that is exactly the rest of the process leads to the creation of what I call a brand voice guide. And so everything that we work on is created as a Bible for your team. So because this is what I noticed when I was doing PR, I used to do PR. And as an independent contractor, it would be very hard to keep people in the company on message and on brand, because if it's a big company, if there's hundreds, thousands, or who knows, even if there's 10 or 15 or 20, it's very hard to have people on the same page. Now, what this brand voice guide is it's like the ABCs of you. So if it's your personal brand or the company, harmonious at lunch, but it's essentially the ABCs of that brand, everything that they need to know and feel about it, then they'll be able to write those emails. They'll be able to do posts. They'll be able to do things with the same voice because it's literally there. Here's the tone. Here's the vocabulary. Here are the keywords, and it's all done over a period of 90 days that I work with a client. And so it's not like, I mean, I love AI and I use AI, and there's a next step that follows my program where there's a way to plug that information in. But getting that information, that's That's the real special part.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was literally going to ask you that next because we actually just went through this process at Humanop. We realized that our brand we're in startup phase right now. We realized our initial brand voice was just a little bit soft, a little bit off from who we really were after being in the marketplace for a number of months. So we tweaked it and we said, okay, now it's crazy for our CMO to be involved in every single decision moving forward.
Right.
So we have to train AI to be able to at least get 90-95% of that process done. I'm a firm believer of not using AI to develop the brand voice. That has to be a personal experience. But it sounds like you two want to leverage AI next. So briefly, what is that next step, and how are you training that AI?
Well, I can't announce it yet because it's the we're not announcing the deal, but there's an app
Oh, it's a
developer.
secret. I love a good secret.
Yeah, it's a secret. There's an app developer that I'm working with where I have been over the last 4 years looking for, and look, I guess over the last 4 years, so much has advanced that we could say waiting for or working toward or looking for. But I wanted to find a partner where I could be, they could match the human uh, commitment that I bring to the development process. So, in other words, what I've come to learn is, as a writer, that AI can be a wonderful partner and kind of executor of our messaging, but it needs really, really good guidance. So I needed an app partner who had developed a guidance system that could take the stuff that I've given it, the stuff that I've, the detail, the care, the nuance, and really apply it in the most practical way. So, there's so much you can do on ChatGPT, and it can give you a lot of great ideas and a lot of great feedback. But so far, if you're the one whose voice it is, you can get the feedback, you can feed it your voice, you can get the feedback, you can nuance it yourself. But again, that's like if your CMO were doing it themselves every time. Whereas this will be, this will have the voices of everybody and everybody of relevance in your organization, and based on a lot of human input and a lot of human development. And so, as to your point, Brandon, it's humans doing all the development and then AI doing all of the implementation across platforms. And that marriage should be really seamless because the work's been done up front.
Yeah. I love that so much. That's exciting news too. Do you have
Yeah.
maybe a target date? You don't have to say anything else. I'm just curious.
um, no, I mean, I would say that probably by the end of the summer it would be announced. That doesn't mean we won't be working with it, over the summer. Like we're technically working with it now, but it's just not announced as a product. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be a soft launch is the best way to say it. Like my clients will start using it very soon, but it'll technically still be in beta.
That's super cool. Well, when you're ready, I'd love to have you back and talk about it because that's
Yeah, happy to.
anything to make our lives easier as entrepreneurs. I'm a huge fan.
Yes, life is hard as entrepreneurs. That's the thing. There's two kinds of people in the world. There's entrepreneurs, and there's people who prefer for it to be easy. you know
It's a good way to
and
say that.
so for the entrepreneurs, there's no reason to not make it a little easier. You don't have to make it harder than it needs to be.
But we can keep trying.
We can keep trying. Yeah, exactly.
I love it.
Exactly. Let me
Hurst, this
let me
was
let me complicate this for you.
yeah, exactly. Hurst, this was a lot of fun. Where can the listeners go to learn more about you, everything you have going on, and maybe taking that step to redevelop their personal brand?
Yeah, well, thank you, Brandon. This has been a lot of fun. I really appreciate it. I appreciate your questions. They can go to yesbrandbuilders.com. There's also, there they can pre-order my book. They can, make appointments. They can see my work. They can see my social proof. Everything's there. And then they can also find my podcast there. So everything's at that hub. And then they can also use another link that we'll have in the show notes, or maybe you have it, where they can take a personal brand quiz. I'd like to offer that to all your listeners as a kind of a gift, because it really gives great feedback on where you're at with your personal brand right now, and it gives some suggestions, and it people really seem to like it as a first step if they kind of don't have a sense of where they're at with their brand.
I like that. That's awesome. Yes, all of those links, all of the websites and social media will be down below in the show notes and description, wherever you're watching or listening. Hersh, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure, Brandon. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of the Harmonious at Lunch podcast. Make sure you subscribe on whatever platform you're on, and we want to invite you to join us in the Small Business Success Facebook group, our private group where guests and listeners come together to grow your business. We want impact-driven entrepreneurs who are ready to go to the next level in this group so we can all share ideas, collaborate, and grow our businesses together. Go to whatif.com/group, and we want to invite you to join today. See you on the next episode of Harmonious at Lunch.